What up, naughty steppers? It's Connor Whitmore here again with another review for you on the Nawtystep channel, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the new Pendulum remix compilation or album released on Earstorm Records, the Reworks. Pendulum are an Australian drum and bass / rock band who are up there with the most legendary groups to come out of the electronic music scene this century. Undoubted pioneers and producers of some of the most iconic electronic music albums of all time, from Hold Your Colour to In Silico and Immersion. Consistent of 5 members, some of which you will know mostly through their solo or duo work, namely frontman Rob Swire, bassist Gareth McGrillen, and drummer KJ Sawker. The first two splitting from Pendulum in around 2011 to form Knife Party, again one of the most widely respected acts to come out of the dark electronic music scene this century. In those 7 years or so, Pendulum taking a complete back seat on the production front. Their last album, Immersion, came out in May 2010. Another band member, El Hornet, doing DJ sets aplenty across the world before the band reunited in March 2016 to play at Ultra Music Festival in Miami. Going on to play several more huge shows at festivals like SW4, Ultra Korea and Ultra Japan, Nova Rock, as well as a one-off performance at London's Printworks, their first headline show in 7 years. The first one mentioned there, SW4, being probably the best gig I've ever been to, no word of a lie, an absolutely mesmeric experience. Rob and Gareth had previously said in 2013 that a new Pendulum album would be coming in 2014, but they later backtracked on that idea, saying that they felt the scene had changed too much and that they had become disillusioned with the Pendulum project. But it was following these shows they did together, their first since Immersion, that people thought new music may actually be on the way. The hype growing and growing until an announcement was made earlier this year that a new album would be coming from Pendulum in June, but not the sort of album everyone expected. Instead, Pendulum took to the internet to announce that they would be releasing a star-studded remix package of their greatest hits from producers of all generations and musical approaches. And so, we have the Reworks. And just by looking at the track listing here, you can tell that Swire & Co really pulled out the stops to create as diverse a list as one could reasonably ask for. You have game-changing acts such as Moby, Skrillex and Noisia, all of whom have had a huge impact on electronic music in completely different ways and at different times historically. There are those artists that you have seen Rob and Gareth give huge support to over the years, such as Icarus and Pegboard Nerds, not to mention Knife Party of course, as well as some musicians that listeners may not have heard of altogether before getting into this compilation, thinking of Ilka Klein, Devin Townsend, DJ Seinfeld. But all in all, as you can see, on paper an almost overwhelming mix of different musical approaches and styles from start to finish. And as expected, with so much variety on offer, this thing is quite hit and miss from track 1 through track 13. Expected not because of anything to do with the calibre of artist on show here, but more because with so many different styles, let alone different artists, you're going to get some that you dislike more than others. And I feel this will be the case with everyone listening to this compilation. There will be no right and wrong, but everyone will have their favourites. And that in a way is the magic of the Reworks. A fair amount of ground is covered here in terms of different moods and tones, making sure that, for want of a better phrase, there is something for everyone. You have the heavier approaches adopted at the start by Noisia, at the end by Atlas, and in the middle by Knife Party, Pegboard Nerds and AN21. You have the lighter approaches of Skrillex, Icarus, DJ Seinfeld and Matrix and Futurebound. And then you have those that lay somewhere in the middle of light and dark, Ilka Klein, Devin Townsend, Grabbits, Moby. The Devin Townsend remix being a bit of a strange one, as it presents itself as an outright heavy track, but is delivered in this filtered way to make it not seem as forceful as it should be. But at the end of the day, what it really boils down to is the ideas, and which remixes in particular are on hand to take Pendulum's originals to new levels. And whilst I wouldn't say that there are any tracks here that I love yet from beginning to end, the Reworks certainly has its fair share of great moments. The switch up in Skrillex's remix of The Island in the second drop, fitting more in and seemingly coming out clearer and more colourful, is genuinely mind-boggling as a listen. An amazing amount of good feeling to this remix while still coming across as quite vulnerable, which some Skrillex fans may not like, but once again it's evidence of his ability to produce in many different moods, styles and tempos. I mean, come on guys, here we have a reggae-infused, future-based banger. Have those words ever left someone's mouth before this track? I don't think so. There are parts of this remix that I don't enjoy. I think he could have played with the vocal a bit more, the talk sounds in the drops, and those fuzzy sounds in the interlude before the second drop. But it is a stunning remix in spite of the fact that it isn't that naughty. The moments at the end of the Grabbits remix to Propane Nightmares, one of my favourite Pendulum tracks, where the heavenly vocal notes are isolated at the end, given their own space and allowed to be appreciated, is a fantastic touch. This is actually a really nice take on the original. Great to see some fresh vocals from Grabbits in there, and the mix of this with the metal elements works really well as this half beautiful, half grungy remake. I love the vocal layering in the Matrix and Futurebound remix, as well as the neuro-y feel to the drops in the Atlas one, working well to tone down the compilation in the final track. And some are not gonna like me for this, but I'm not gonna lie guys, the drops in the Knife Party remix, I really like them. Don't get me wrong, when I first heard this track I was just like you. I was like, seriously? Come on guys, surely you can do better than that. You are better than that. But the more I've listened to it, the more I've realised its infectious Knife Party appeal, the evil bounce of it, so standoffish and full of bravado. Not gonna pretend I enjoy those jittery progressions to the drops as much, but for me those initial releases just have that classic Knife Party alertness and definition to them. However, for me the best remixes come from Moby and Icarus. The former being this panoramic musical journey that places you high above the heavens within this well formulated drum and bass structure. Emotional too in tapping into that old school ecstasy fueled electronic music vibe, dipping in and out of consciousness. You've just got to rock your head back and sink into it. I must admit, I am amazed that his musical techniques still have relevance today and can translate into more modern approaches, but it works really well, growing into itself more and more as it goes on. Form is temporary, class is permanent. The Icarus remix again being a bit of a slow burner, growing on you more and more the more you immerse yourself in its sounds and direction. I love the experimental aspect of it atop the progressive house format, all the different moods it goes through. Again, quite a journey this one. Also interesting how such a hectic original can be brought down in such a mellow way, yet still have such a thumping beat behind it. Quite an intriguing dynamic. In singing such praises, however, time must also be spent talking about the remixes that I didn't feel worked quite as well on this compilation. Noizia's remix of one of Pendulum's biggest hits, Hold Your Colour, is a gripping way to start the Reworks, but far from anything you would align with their most ambitious stuff. I just feel like what they did come up with could have been built on so much more, made more epic and drawn out, just strengthened beyond that end result, which comes across as a bit withdrawn. I enjoy how the Ilka Klein remix swells and contracts every now and then, but it seems to be in this weird limbo state between wanting to be both subtle and huge, neither of which it gets quite right. I mentioned the fantastic neuro-led drops to the Atlas track, but the dreamy bits to accompany it just seem a little bit off alongside those more seizing moments. And whilst the vocal layering is a massive selling point to the Matrix and Futurebound remix, the drum and bass is nothing to throw you off your seat, and I feel like there's not enough to it musically throughout. We also have the tracks that I'm struggling a little to get anything from, to be honest. Surprisingly, the Pegboard Nerds remix of Witchcraft, which has so much promise on paper, is quite frankly all over the place. It starts well but goes into these very strange, super frantic sequences with no sense of build or anticipation, just sections pretty much placed alongside each other. Little awareness or composure is exhibited here between particular sections, as there's no real contrast from one to the other. I heard of Pegboard Nerds thanks to Rob and Gareth back in 2012, and remembering some of those tracks that got them well known in the first place, again, I feel like they could have done much better here. Similarly weird is the AN21 remix of The Island. I appreciate the weight of these drops, but there's no flavour or personality to them at all. So empty. Seems quite unsure of itself as a result, meaning that it's quite difficult to get into, in spite of the fact that the beat is quite punchy and serious. The DJ Seinfeld remix is a bit too kooky in my opinion, experimental in a way that makes you try harder than ever to find something going for it. Just doesn't offer that much at all, no story or appeal to it, just a selection of notes over quite a standard tech backdrop. It's just there. Lastly, the Devin Townsend remix of Crush, a chance to reignite one of Pendulum's most recent and underrated tracks, doesn't do that. I touched on the fact that it has this desire to be heavy through its rock and metal design, without really being that at all. As if everything was ramped up here and felt a little bit too intense, so we lowered the volumes of everything and put it through a filter in the process. I appreciate the guitar-inspired avenues this compilation goes down, but it treads a fine line between being done really well and not quite so well, and I certainly know which ones I prefer. These tracks may be the exact ones that other people love from the compilation, but for me they don't work both individually and within the context of the project as a whole. Going off what I've said already, there's even an extent to which some of the remixes seem more like experiments than solid, well-rounded attempts at remaking these originals. Some glaringly half-baked songs that just don't do the originals justice, and in their sounds are lacking in purpose and direction. You'll know the ones that I mean by now. Fundamentally, however, I find myself really enjoying the variety on show in the reworks from beginning to end. There's a solid mix of early days electronic music material and more modern techniques, bits of rock too amidst an array of different tempo structures. It certainly wins on that part. In that sense, even though it is a remix album from 13 completely different artists, there is a journey to this compilation, the placement of each track being spot on in what they deliver at their respective points. It makes me wonder actually how they came to decide who would be on this compilation, how many Pendulum members had a say, what it was dependent on. I suppose only they will ever know. More than anything though, I think we just have to appreciate that the reworks is a thing in and of itself. It's a great way of warming fans up to some potentially new material from the band in the future, which both Swire and KJ Sorka have alluded to on separate occasions. Yes, I may not love any of the remixes on here just yet, but I'm happy it's here as a celebration of some of Pendulum's most iconic tracks. Plus, some of these tracks I'm enjoying more and more as I listen to them again and again. Could be that slow burner effect, meaning I end up loving them. I did think of some tracks that I would have absolutely loved to be on this compilation, but unfortunately weren't. Just gonna list them here. Girl in the Fire, The Other Side, Slam, The Vulture. I would have loved to have seen some takes on these originals, especially with some tracks on the reworks being done twice. But this made me think also of just how hard it would be to remix a Pendulum song. Where does one even start with redoing such classics, let alone making them worthwhile in any way? Kinda made me want to listen to the originals again, to be honest. On that note, what next for Pendulum? New music has been talked of and addressed by key band members, as I said. But having learnt through Knife Party and their disrupted release schedules, when exactly that will be very much up in the air. And until then, I don't think we should demand anything from them at all. I don't want them to feel like they have to make another album just because people are thirsty for it, rushing it and possibly tainting their image in the process. Would you want to have a new Pendulum album tomorrow if it meant it was half-baked and haphazardly put together? No. So get off their backs about producing new music and let them do everything in their own time. Also, the 3 albums they've done already are timeless and will never stop giving more and more with each listen. Is that really not enough for you? Turning into a slight rant here, but honestly I'm sick to death of people demanding new music from producers Do you know how hard it is to make a song, let alone an album of that quality? How long it takes? How everything has to come together? And this isn't just one person sitting at a computer and suddenly they get a moment of inspiration and bam, they're in. This is a band we're talking about. I see so many comments of "this is the same song, I want new music," or "oh, it's just a show, I was expecting a new album." Give them space to create, for God's sake, or you'll be the reason why what they produce doesn't come out exactly as you would want it to. My guess, however, based on this tweet, is that a fair bit of it has already been written. I mean, he couldn't exactly say something like this without already having laid some serious groundwork. Which, don't get me wrong, I'm definitely not complaining about. I love this band and would absolutely cherish a new album from them. Just please let them do it in their own time. And breathe. Back to the compilation, and my favourite from the reworks is probably the Icarus remix of Tarantula. I find it to be the most emotionally charged, the most evocative, the most stimulating, and I love how it just reveals more and more to you as it goes on. No recommendations for this one, I'm afraid, because there are so many different styles on show, but if you haven't gotten into Pendulum yet, listen to their 3 albums ASAP. It may be a bit of a nostalgia thing for me, but they are one of my favourite musical acts of all time. One of the main reasons I'm so into electronic music now. They move me in ways that I don't feel any other musical act ever will. And so that is that for another review on the Nawtystep channel, this time of the new remix compilation from Pendulum entitled The Reworks, released on Earstorm Records. Thank you very much, and as always, for tuning in. Be sure to leave a comment with your thoughts on the reworks. What did you guys make of it? Which track was your favourite of the 13? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, then be sure to give it a big old thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hitting that notification bell along the way so you can be notified whenever I upload to the Nawtystep channel. Next to my head there should be some other compilation reviews from the channel, as well as other examples of stuff that we do on Nawtystep, so if you enjoyed this one then be sure to check those out too. And don't forget to like and follow Nawtystep across social media if you haven't already, all of which are linked in the description box down below. And lastly, if it's naughty, then you know guys, so be sure as always to keep it naughty and stay safe. And I shall see all of you folks in the next one. Peace out.